Welcome back to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. My name is Rob Doster. Feels like we got something to talk about today, right? Feels like we got a little bit of a conversation piece. You know, it's Thursday afternoon. It's been a while since I've been back from Houston. I took a red eye back on Tuesday morning on zero sleep. Spent the entire day I was home on Tuesday trying to figure out how the hell I was going to stay awake to parent my children. And then on Wednesday, I spent the entire day getting caught up on everything that I neglected around my house for probably the last 6 weeks in total. So I'm just now getting a chance to kind of sit down and record this podcast and film this, and I'm still processing like what the hell just happened, right? Like think about where this fan base was. Think about what we were talking about on this podcast way back in the end of January, right? And I remember it specifically because it was the Xavier game. It was after the Xavier game at home. It was after UConn had made that comeback, and it was after they had kind of put themselves in a position where they were they looked like they were the team that was close to what they were at the start of the year. I remember I said it specifically. I actually titled this podcast it was January 29th. It was after the Xavier loss, the sixth time in 8 games. I said, this is the best that I felt about UConn in a month. And from that point on, UConn went 15-2. From that point on, the only losses that they suffered were a 3-point loss at Creighton, a game where Jordan Hawkins was literally a toenail away from forcing overtime, and a 2-point loss against Marquette in the Big East tournament, where they were a couple of missed threes away from getting to the semifinals of that matchup. So it's pretty remarkable to think about how a team can go from being incredibly dominant for 2 months to having a month where they look absolutely atrocious to being incredibly dominant for 2 months to close out the season and make a run all the way to a national title. I don't know. I don't understand it. Well, let me rephrase that, because I do understand it, because I do think that there were some very specific changes that were made that allowed UConn to go on this run. And we've talked about it plenty, and I don't want to rehash it too much because it would feel like a little bit self-congratulatory. It would feel a little bit too much like a pat on my own back, when really all I did was sit here and kind of watch and just kind of say, like, this is what they're doing and this is why they're doing it. So I want to just kind of talk about this season in the big picture, right? So I think so much of what we focused on, at least what I focused on throughout the year, was the development of Andre Jackson, going from Andre Jackson to Andre fucking Jackson, who, by the way, was Andre fucking Jackson throughout the entire tournament. I don't think we talked enough about just how good Tristan Newton was over the course of the final, 6, 8, 10 weeks of the season, something like that. He went from being a guy that a lot of people, including myself, including the coaching staff, they questioned at the start of the year. There were questions about how good he was when UConn kind of went on that downswing and they lost some of those road games. There were questions about, does this guy have I don't want to say the ability, because I think we knew he had the ability. Does this guy have what it takes to be the point guard that you have to be on a national championship team? And, when he was struggling in mid-January, it did not look like he did. And there were criticisms of him, and some of those criticisms were probably, they were fair to a point, right? And it was just awesome to see Tristan kind of turn it around and put everything together and be the guy. I don't want to say carried UConn to the national title. That's probably a little bit too strong, because this was Adama's run, and we're going to get into that in a second. But he was the guy that turned into the closer that UConn needed, right? Like, if you go back, this is the perfect way to summarize kind of the way that I feel about it, is that down the stretch of the national title game against San Diego State, what UConn did was stopped running their offense. And we've talked on this pod quite a bit about how elaborate their offensive sets are, and how unique it is that they have such a deep playbook and they are so effective at running that playbook. They can implement a new set the day before a game and run it perfectly the first time that it gets run. Like they're very, very well drilled, and they are very smart and quick at picking that stuff up. But at the end of the game against San Diego State, they weren't doing any of that. They weren't running all of these elaborate sets. They weren't running this crazy offense. They were just kind of giving the rock to Tristan Newton and saying, "Take us home. This is your show. Take us home." They gave him the keys to the car, and he, there were some turnovers, and the ball got picked. His pocket got picked a couple times, and Darren Chamel is 5'10" and a pest, and can be a little bit of a problem. But at the end of the day, Tristan Newton finished with 19 points. Finished with 10 boards. He finished with 4 assists. He had a couple huge clutch buckets, and he was the guy that set up Jordan Hawkins' massive 3 to win that game. And it's just I'm so happy for him that he was able to have that moment and he was able to have that level of success, because there were quite a few people that did not believe that that was something that was ever going to be possible. And he proved a lot of people wrong, and he turned himself into a UConn legend in the process. And he's a kid from El Paso. He's a kid that spent a couple years at East Carolina. He is probably not someone that grew up idolizing UConn from, since he was 5 years old. You would have to ask him just how much this is a place for him to play, as opposed to a place that means everything to him. But I'll tell you this much, there are a lot of fans where he's going to mean everything to them moving forward. So it's very cool to see guys kind of go from being a player to growing into that legend status. And I do believe that that's kind of where Tristan Newton is right now. So super happy for him. Super impressive performance from him. And just kind of, I really loved how he embraced just being able to, there's 2 different ways you can get into the lane, right? There is the cross people over, blow by them because you are so much faster and no one can stay in front of you. And there's also being able to get someone off balance and having the strength to, once you get your shoulder past them, and once you're able to kind of get them on your hip, to be able to keep them on your hip and get all the way to the basket. And Tristan is very much the latter. And it was a lot of fun to watch him figure out how to be able to utilize that skill set. And it was a lot of fun to watch the coaching staff, once they figured out, like, this is what we got to do to be able to make sure that that he's doing what we need them to do, or he's doing what we need him to do on the offensive end of the floor. So that was awesome. I also want to give a shout out to Adama Sanogo, because I do think when we look back at UConn NCAA tournament runs, right? You got the Kemba Walker NCAA tournament run in 2011 and the Big East tournament run and everything that he did that season. He was fantastic. And you got the Shabazz Napier run where him and Ryan Boatwright manned a backcourt and carried UConn to the 2014 national title in spite of Kevin Ollie's coaching acumen. And then you have 2004, where it was kind of similar to this team, right? Where you had a bunch of really good players, you had a couple good guards, you had some shooters on the perimeter, Rashad Anderson specifically, and you had everything kind of built around 6'9" Houston native Emeka Okafor. And I think that run kind of gets remembered as the run where they beat Duke, right? The run where you had that unbelievable semifinal matchup with Duke, the 8-point comeback in 3 minutes, all that. And I think this year's run will be remembered for a lot of things, but I'm going to remember it for the absolute sheer and utter dominance of Adama Sanogo. Like, that dude is one of the strongest human beings I've ever seen on a basketball court. You cannot move him. If he wants to be somewhere, you are not going to get him off of the place that he wants to be. If he decides that he's going to try to get somewhere, you can stand in between them, but you're not going to stop him from getting to the place that he wants to get to. And to me, the incredible part about it is he's very good at doing that without picking up a bunch of offensive fouls, without lowering his shoulder and battering through people. He's strong, he's tough, and he's got a delightful, graceful little touch as well. It's a very odd combination of abilities to have, but he's got both of them. And it was very fun to watch him kind of grow into being this absolute superstar at the 5, because that's something throughout the year. How much have we talked about, not just on this pod, not just on the field of 68, everywhere? How much have we talked about the fact that it's very difficult to be able to win a national title when you have an offense that's built around a 5-man, when everything runs through the post. How much have we talked about how difficult it is to be a big guy in college basketball and be able to win being a big guy in college basketball because of the issues that come with switching and guarding and things of that nature. And it was yeah, it was nice to see Adama Sanogo prove everybody wrong. And I think a lot of it actually has to do with the fact that this was the most well-balanced team. And you know what, let's talk about that because I think what this staff did was they put together the absolutely perfect college basketball team. There may be situations where you could upgrade specific pieces. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Tristan Newton is the best point guard in college basketball. He's a national champion. He's a national title point guard. But there are players individually that are probably better than him. But I think the concept of the way that, that doesn't mean to just call him out. Like, there are foremen that are better than Alex Caravan. There are backup players off the bench that are better than Heem and Joey Calcaterra. There are two guards that are probably better than Jordan. Like, that's not I'm not just singling out Tristan Newton. But I think that in totality that this is exactly what you want when you build a college basketball team. You have two creators, right? You have Tristan Newton and you have Andre Jackson, who could both handle playmaking duties. You have three shooters on the floor at all times, whether it's Jordan Hawkins or Joey Calcaterra and Naheem Aline, or Tristan Newton, or Alex Caravan, or whoever. You have three guys that can make threes, potentially four, depending on how you view Adama Sanogo, right? You have length, athleticism, and versatility everywhere on your roster and everywhere on your lineup. They're starting five with 6'5" Tristan Newton, 6'4" Jordan Hawkins, 6'6" Andre Jackson, 6'8" Alex Caravan, and 6'9" Adama Sanogo. If they wanted to, they could switch 1 through 4. If they wanted to, they could probably get away with switching 1 through 5. And that doesn't even include the 7'2" monster that you got coming off the bench. They can play big if they need to, right? Because what they can do is they can put Andre Jackson kind of at the point guard spot with Naheem Aline and maybe even probably Tristan Newton out there with Alex Caravan and Donovan Clingan. Like, you can play small where Naheem Aline and Andre Jackson can be your forwards. They've made themselves completely matchup proof by by gathering a bunch of shooters, a bunch of length, a bunch of athleticism, a bunch of guys that are tough enough to guard their yard. And they did it all with the best combination of big men that I've seen on a team since probably Jim Calhoun was playing, right? Like, you want to get a low post big that takes the pressure off you could throw it into on the block, you got Adama Sanogo down there. You want to play drop coverage with a 7'2" eraser that is going to end up being a lottery pick at some point, then you put Donovan Clingan out there. It was super sharp, incredible identification of guys, right? An incredible job of kind of figuring out exactly who the right players in the portal were to go get. Like, and I don't think that's something that can be overstated, right? Look at the transfers that they brought in. Tristan Newton hit. Naheem Aline, it hit. Joey Calcaterra, he was originally supposed to be a guy that just came in to play a bench. To play a bench role and be a practice player. That was a hit, no question about it. The two freshmen that came in, Alex Caravan and Donovan Clingan, they were hits. They were guys that found a way to make it work. The only, I don't even want to call him a miss because I don't think that's probably a little bit unfair to just how good he's been. But Hassan Diarra was a guy that came in and was very good at just kind of playing his role as a disruptor off the bench and accepting that, like, okay, I might be a guy that only sees 10 minutes a game and not being someone that can kind of complain about it. And then from there, like, look at the freshmen and the recruits that they brought in. Jordan Hawkins hit, Alex Caravan hit, Donovan Clingan hit. You even go back a year earlier, Andre Jackson hit, Adama Sanogo hit. So they've done a very good job at just kind of identifying if there's a miss. Javonte Brown Ferguson didn't work out the way that you would expect him to work out. Samson Johnson hasn't quite figured out just how good he is yet. Rasul Diggins, that was obviously a swing and a miss. I still think that Corey Floyd is going to end up looking like a very sharp recruiting target, even if it is for Providence instead of for UConn. So the talent identification and the ability of this staff to figure out who they want and then go get those players is very, very, very important. Like, that doesn't happen a lot. Like, it's not often that you see a coaching staff have that many hits when they're bringing in recruiting classes and when they're bringing in players. So kudos to them, man. Like there's a lot of half the battle. Like when people think about recruiting, what they think about is like getting the big name talents. Like who is the best at finding at being able to get like a top 10 prospect onto campus, right? A 5-star player onto campus. And that's part of it. You got to be able to get the kids that you identify. But the other part of it is being able to identify who is going to do well for you and who is going to play well for you, right? Who is going to fit what we want to do? Who's going to fit our culture? Who is going to fit our identity as a program? And I don't know. Like I haven't run the numbers on it and I haven't studied it all that hard, but I can't imagine there are too many that have been better over the course of the last 3 years than this UConn coaching staff at identifying the guys that are going to help them and being able to go get those dudes. Like it's incredible. And it makes me feel very good about what next season could end up being with this recruiting class that they have coming in. And, you know, I will say this too. I think that this is of all the I've been alive and been conscious and been a UConn fan for all 5 of the national titles that they have. I was 14 years old in 1999. I was a freshman. I'm sorry, I was in 8th grade, and I vividly remember losing my mind when they won that. I vividly remember watching that game and hearing Khalid El-Amin yell, "We shocked the world." I vividly remember Jim Nance's top dogs call. I vividly remember waiting and hoping that there was not going to be a foul called against Trajan Langdon when, you know, with the travel and all that. So I think that this is the one that it's weird because a lot of those other titles had games that like you had to survive, right? There was the St. Joseph's game in the first round of 2014. The national title game was a 1-point game. There was in 2011, right? Like the Arizona game there that kind of could have been a loss, right? There was in 2004 there was the comeback against Duke. In 1999 there was a game against Washington. Like there was always something in all of these years where it kind of gave you that euphoric moment where you could go nuts and you could celebrate a shot. Like there was no iconic. The closest thing we got to an iconic moment in this year's tournament run for UConn was the Jordan Hawkins shot with 5 minutes left against San Diego State. And that turned a 5-point game that had been double digits the entire game into an 8-point lead. It wasn't like that was the only time there was even a little bit of game pressure on UConn in the second half throughout this tournament run. So it's a little bit different because it very much felt like this was never in doubt, right? But I do think that this one kind of it feels different than the other one. I don't even know if it's better. I kind of have to let that process a little bit more. But I think I enjoyed this one the most because I didn't truly believe. Like I bought into the coaching staff. I bought into Hurley. I bought into Luke Murray. I bought into Kamani. Like I thought that this group had a chance to be able to do this or to be able to get UConn to be really good again and really relevant again. But I don't know if I fully believe that they were going to be able to win it. Like winning a national title is just so damn hard to do. And there was part of me that just kind of assumed that this was maybe never going to happen again. And being able to see them come from a team that, you know, finished at the bottom of the AAC, that finished below like Tulane, that was playing East Carolina, and that went from as bad as things were to back to being as good as they are right now. It just, I don't know if I ever fully believed it. So I really do think that this is something that is special. And it's something that, and the other part of it is I think a lot of it for me, just personally, is like my son is 7 years old now. Like he's conscious of what sports are. He's super into sports. He loves UConn. He goes nuts. He texts. He can't type out text yet. So during games, I have to text with either my mom or my wife, and just because he wants to go back and forth and he wants to be able to have that conversation and talk. So I think that made it special. Just everything about it. Like this was, you know, a pretty unforgettable ride. And at least for me, like when I was when I was laid off 2.5 years ago, I didn't think that I would ever be able to do something. I thought that was it. That was the end of my trips to the Final Four. I thought that was the end of my life being somebody that covers college basketball. And to be able to build this, whatever this is, Field of 68, into something where I'm now able to get access. I'm now able to go on the court and interview Dan Hurley after they win the national title. I'm now able to get back into these locker rooms and talk to these guys and be able to sit courtside with all this like I'm just so incredibly appreciative of kind of where I'm at. And I guess the other thing is just like I really do appreciate the openness of this staff. You know, Hurley, Luke, Kamani, Tom Moore, Phil Shardis, like just kind of allowing me to be able, like I can't do this without being able to get them and get access to them. And even if it's just getting a text message responded back to or anything like that, you know, getting in the locker room, being able to do the show from the Providence game, like it just, I feel very lucky and fortunate to kind of be in this position. And, you know, a lot of that are the guys that pay attention to the show. You know, there were a couple hundred of you that showed up for our streams from McIntyre's. And like that kind of blew my mind that we had that many people there. Like every single one of you that came up to me, it's like, Rob, I love Top Dogs. And I'm like, it's odd that, I don't know, like I'm very proud of the work I do here, but it's still just kind of surreal when people tell me how much it means to them. So I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for all of you guys that tune in. I'm thankful for a lot right now. So it's what a moment. What a win. What a title. Number 5. That's really all I got to say about it, except this. It's time to go get number 6, Danny. No one at UConn has ever won back-to-back titles. Pressure's on.